Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about the women who are reshaping our world. Coming up, with Donald Trump back in the White House, they've become the most controversial initials. That's DEI, or Diversity, Equity and Inclusion programs promoting equality in the workplace. The US President having declared war on DEI, declaring it to be immoral. So where does this leave corporate DEI programs and gender equality in the workforce? And what does it mean beyond American shores? I'll be talking shortly to Dr Marcelle Laliberté, the Chief DEI Officer at HEC, France's leading business school. And we meet the woman who's become Pakistan's preeminent mixed martial arts fighter, competing on an international level, who's possibly broken as many bones as she has barriers. But first, the principles of diversity, equity and inclusion are designed to ensure a fair working environment for all. But in his campaign to return to the White House, Donald Trump made it a mission to eliminate DEI, and with a sweep of a pen, he's done just that, banning programs that he calls immoral and discriminatory. As a result, all federal workers in DEI roles have been placed on leave as federal agency websites were scrubbed of inclusive language, while pages celebrating women's achievements were removed, as Siobhan Silk reports.
Donald Trump's so-called war on woke is so central to his presidency that it was part of his inauguration speech.
I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life.
Among the avalanche of executive orders the US president signed in his first days in office was one banning all diversity, equity and inclusion programs. These DEI programs are designed to redress systemic imbalances and help remove the barriers underrepresented groups face to education and employment. That includes women, ethnic minorities, LGBTQ+ people and people with disabilities.
Since 1975, the United States and here in Minnesota, we made a decision that we would include every student in an opportunity to get a first-class education. Know that I am angry about it.
Education is one of the principal targets. Under the threat of losing federal funding, American schools, colleges and universities have been ordered to end all DEI initiatives within a short deadline. And research dollars could be pulled from studies that cover certain topics.
My professor told me that he had just received a list of words that were banned from all grant proposals. And he told me that those banned words include women and female.
Kendra Dahmer is a postdoctoral scientist who has benefited from initiatives for women in the sciences and whose work on infectious diseases focuses on the global south. She's concerned she could lose her funding both because of who she is and what she studies.
Part of my worry is that since I'm on this diversity supplement as a diverse individual, that my funding may be cut. But there's also this aspect of research that funds specific studies in specific populations that are now being deemed DEI.
One of Trump's leading generals in his war on woke is Elon Musk, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency that's been taking the axe to federal funding. But the new norm is spreading far beyond government. A raft of tech giants and other multinationals are folding to the new regime, scrubbing inclusive language from their websites and cancelling DEI programs.
So where does this leave DEI in the workplace? And just as importantly, is it impacting business culture beyond the shores of America? Joining me now from Montauban is Dr Marcelle Laliberté, the Chief DEI Officer at HEC, France's leading business school. Marcelle, thank you so much for your time. Given your position and just how damaging are Trump's views when it comes to promoting equality in the workplace, and are we seeing the death of DEI as a result?
To answer that question is to acknowledge the complexity of the issue. I think we need to be well aware of the different layers at play. And often when I'm asked to give some insights as to what's going on in the US, context matters in this situation. So what's going on from a Trump perspective is US based on US cultural codes, their laws in place and whatnot. And of course, we get a lot of media information from the US, but in a European context, it doesn't play out exactly the same way because of European Union directives, for example, and laws like in France that we have in place for a few years.
But does it still impact the way in which people do business? And I'm thinking particularly of multinationals where they have offices both in the US and in Europe.
I think there's one of the things that I like to share when I do work with organizations is sort of, again, contextualize. What the concerns in the US are around litigation. Essentially, we're worried about sort of, am I going to be challenged in court if I apply diversity, equity, and inclusion? But again, it's on the language. In the US, you have protected groups around race, color, ethnicity, gender, and are they given preference to other groups? So some of these initiatives have given preference, and this is where we start getting this muddled language where DEI is illegal. It is illegal when it's not in the spirit of what the Civil Acts law had put in place in 1964. So when organizations are not very clear on the litigation or the risks that they run when they use that language, and then you have a lot of noise there, and then it translates over here because we read the American media. And of course, it can raise some questions, but then we have to fall back to what are the regulations in place in France, for example.
So at this point, let me ask you, how effective has DEI been, especially when you refer to women in the workplace? For instance, according to Forbes magazine in October last year, only 9% of CEOs in the largest American companies are women, and that itself is a stunningly low figure.
It is. Again, in a US context, those are the elements, and to have effective diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, you need to have a systemic approach. Whereas what we've seen in France with the Copé-Zimmermann law or the Loi Rixin that were put in place asking for certain representation within boards and executive committees, we have seen some shifts. Now, it's not at the level that we would like to see it or at the speed that it's occurring, but it has shifted in a positive direction.
But is there not a danger in this climate, Marcelle, that self-censorship starts to kick in, where you see companies steering clear of mentioning the concept or even universities refraining from promoting research into the field?
There is a risk of self-censorship if we don't take the time to read the fine details. The use of the Trump administration around DEI is illegal is not exactly true. What we're trying to, or what the spirit of the Civil Acts right, is to ensure that everyone has equal treatment, that is equal in front of the law. And so we can shift how we approach diversity programs in terms of addressing that. The danger lies in if we just assume what the narratives are telling us right now, what we're reading in the media, or some of these sort of campaigns around to really make the language negative around diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, when companies have seen the benefits and in terms of performance, in terms of innovation, they will continue to work on their systemic programs. But what we will probably see is a change in language. So it may not be diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've seen more in terms of inclusion as language coming through, or belonging. So we want to create a workforce that everyone feels like they belong. And so those shifts in language, yet the spirit of the value stays the same. But I think it's back to those narrative playbooks that are being used right now to make DEI very evil and dangerous, which in fact it's not. It's how do we respect our cultural laws or the laws that we have in place within our country. So US-centric on the Civil Rights Act, and in the EU or France specifically, equal representation through the Loi Copé-Zimmermann or the Rixin law that's been put in place here in France to ensure that there is equal representation.
Marcelle, it's been great speaking to you. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Annette.
And finally, it's a story you would not expect to emerge from Pakistan, where it's extremely rare for women to take up sports in this deeply conservative Muslim country, as it's often forbidden by families. But Antonia Kerrigan reports on one woman who's broken many barriers by pursuing a career in mixed martial arts, or MMA, at an international level.
MMA, a mix of kickboxing, judo and wrestling, is not a sport for the faint-hearted, which some take to mean not a sport for women. But Anita Karim is proving them wrong, wearing with pride the nickname Arm Collector.
I broke the two girls' arm, but that was their mistake, so they call Arm Collector.
She clarifies that the girls whose arms she broke had chosen not to tap the mat and surrender, which they could have done, and has paid tribute to the two competitors' bravery, fighting and performing with a smile. Although she is not alone in this Islamabad gym, she's the first Pakistani woman to be winning international MMA fights, having learnt to fight as a child in altercations with one of her brothers, one of whom is now her coach. Karim's native Gilgit-Baltistan region is known for more progressive social norms on modesty and is becoming a hub for women's sport in Pakistan. But dress codes still keep women away from sport.
You have to wear shorts, you have to have a t-shirt, the shorts need to be above knee length, which is against the norms of normal Pakistani people.
But it's not just about sport. Taking power away from violent men remains a point of pride for the 28-year-old.
He tried to harass me, like a street harassment. He tried to touch me, and then I just throw my phone and I run all 5 minutes, and I just cage him and I beat him and he had a lot of blood on his face and everything.
80% of Pakistani women have been victims of harassment in public spaces, and Karim wants to give them the confidence and skills to defend themselves.
And that's it for this edition. So until our next show, bye for now.